So, as I mentioned, we spent quite a lot of time reading and deconstructing the actual standards and thinking about two things, really: the verbs in the standards and the nouns. We did this by looking at the standard and reading it with our grade level teams, and then putting those verbs and nouns and other additional clarifications into a table that looked like this below. So we had the verbs on the left, the nouns in the middle, and then if there are any additional clarifications, like in this case, it's important to know that students are doing this in second grade with guidance and support or in collaboration with peers. So they're not yet doing this independently. They have a lot of support here. Here's an example of a sixth grade writing standard, deconstructed. And then here's an example of a grades 9-10 writing standard, deconstructed. And the purpose behind doing this is that it's easy to read a standard and look at it really holistically and say, yeah, I do that. Yes, I do that. But when we deconstruct it like this, it really forces us to think about what exactly are students doing? Are they synthesizing? How am I doing that? Are they synthesizing multiple sources on the subject, or am I just having them synthesize key learnings from their text and personal experience instead of multiple sources? Am I having them actually demonstrate what is being asked here, or am I having them just do a presentation? Okay. So this is quite helpful when you're trying to really parse out, am I teaching the standards, or am I just thinking that I am? And it really helps us to do a lot of close self-reflection on what actually are we doing, and does it line up with what the standards are asking us to do. So we did this for all of the standards: writing, reading, and speaking and listening. And in addition, we thought a lot about, in order to do this well, so in order to do, for example, in order to do this well, what is it that teachers need? What is it that students need? And then because of the population that you work with, we were thinking quite a bit about what the language demands are for this particular standard, for each standard. So here's an example of grades 9-10 writing standard. And again, this really just helps us to make a little bit more concrete, solidify what is it that I'm going to see students doing if I walk into a classroom and they're doing this standard. Are they practicing generating questions that they're going to research? Are they practicing engaging in sustained inquiry? Are they actually using a library database? And then, of course, to do this well, teachers need, that's really helping us to think about, are there gaps in the resources that we have or the knowledge base that we have? Do we need more professional development on something in particular? Do we need a different kind of book or a different set of resources that can help us with this? And what would that be? The other thing that we did was think about focus. While it's hard to really take out any of the standards and call them unimportant, all of them are important. They're all grade level standards, and as a 4th grade, 5th grade, 6th grade, 10th grade, 11th grade, 8th grade teacher, we're responsible for teaching all of those. But it may be true that there are some that are more worthy of focus than others. And so we thought quite a bit about that, and thought really hard about which are those standards that it's vital for students to leave with a very strong grasp of these skills or this knowledge. And as we did that, we filled in these charts. So for example, in kindergarten, they thought about which of these standards 1 through 12 would be the blue standards for kindergarten. 3rd grade, same thing, all the way down through high school. If we wanted to go further with this, we could suggest that there are supporting standards of a couple different levels. They're important for the grade, but they're more of a focus either 1 year before or 1 year after. And then for the yellow, they're important skills or knowledge for this grade. They're still standards that you're going to teach, but they're more of a focus either 2 years before or 2 years after. And just to show you an example, this was the original one for writing that the teachers back in June came up with. And what we did was try to have some conversations about areas where maybe in one grade it was a focus, and then the very next grade they decided it was a yellow or a green, and then it went back to blue. So it's not that that was wrong, it's just that we wanted to have a conversation about why is that what we're doing? Is that okay? Perhaps things need to change, and we had some conversations about that. So once we did that, we made some revisions to how this focus chart was looking. And here's what we ended up with. Again, it still may not be perfect, but it gives us an idea of where are our primary focus areas for each grade. What's that look like? Okay. We then talked a bit about lessons. We're trying to move down to the classroom level. I'm thinking of a lesson that you taught recently, and what were your learning goals? So if you had to think of that, what would you say? A lesson that you taught recently, and what were your learning goals? Obviously, school's just starting now, so you may not have taught a lesson recently, but we're making a shift now into thinking about assessment and how we know whether students meet the learning goals that we set for them or not. And then what are we going to do if, for example, a student didn't meet the learning goal? Are we just going to say, well, you didn't meet the learning goal, the rest of us are moving on? Or is it important enough of a learning goal that we're going to find ways to help that student meet that learning goal? And I would hope the answer is the latter. We talked about a few different types of assessment. Obviously, there are more kinds of assessment than this. For example, you might give diagnostic assessments. They're not listed here. But for the purposes of thinking about our maps, these kinds of assessments are things that may go into your curriculum maps. We have formative, interim, and summative. Generally speaking, formative assessments are ones that happen moment by moment in the classroom with students and teachers. It tends to be less formal. It could be descriptive in nature. These are things like give me thumbs up. Some teachers mentioned using exit tickets. Those are great formative assessments. Interims are probably a little bit more formal. They happen maybe several times a year, usually after a bit of instruction. It's mostly to certify learning, or it's an assessment of learning. Did the students learn what they were supposed to learn? And then summative, obviously, they don't happen very frequently. These are those end of year assessments. And generally speaking, they're mostly evaluative and not really intended to inform daily instruction. So formative assessment process is one that I'd really like for you to think about in your map development. These can be the most meaningful assessments that occur between students and teachers. It's a process that you use, and maybe your students even use, and it's during instruction. It provides feedback so that you can adjust your teaching, and students can adjust their learning sometimes. It's usually embedded within a learning activity, and it's linked directly to whatever you're doing in class, the current instruction that's happening. Formative assessment process should answer these 3 questions. Where am I going? How am I progressing? And where to next? So if you think about what kinds of formative assessment practices you currently use, I gave you a couple of examples. You may use those. Here's one that I like to share. This is from a teacher in Garden City who developed this as a way for students to every day quickly let her know how they're doing on a skill that she's working on. So every day she just asks them, where are you on this chart? Are you a 1, 2, 3, or 4? And the students are quickly able to see whether they're making progress or not in their quest to reach a level 4. And she's able to see, too, where is everyone and where do I need to go next? Okay, we're going to do a quick knowledge check. We'll meet you back here soon.